The Big Four agenda. One of the pillars that really stuck out in the president's speech, this is on page 7 of the Standard and 5 of the Nation. Uhuru drums up support for cheaper houses plan. He said they are on track to construct 500,000 cheap houses by 2022, and he hopes to launch the first phase of that housing development in a week's time. And of course, there'll be a contribution scheme that begins in January. Employers and employees will each contribute 1.5% of the monthly gross salary to the Kenya Housing Development Fund. The money can be accessed through a tenant purchase deal, and house buyers can borrow cheaply from the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company. A lot of questions coming up around this particular scheme. People wondering, if I already own a home, why am I being forced to contribute to such a scheme? And what happens to that money if I retire? Do I get it back? So there's just a lot of questions around this particular plan. It's noble in the way they've crafted it, but execution, and many feel, will it actually work by 2022? Honorable Baraza, let me begin with you.
The problem that we are having is that this Big Four agenda was not properly articulated in the budget policy statements, and it seemed to focus most on the output as opposed to the strategies on how is it going to be used. The only agenda that I support, and is pretty a very good agenda, is the one on universal health care, and the one on attempts to shift gears from agriculture that relies on natural rain to mechanized agriculture. But on the issue of manufacturing, let us be very honest. We have seen companies like Eveready, Samia Africa closing to go and open elsewhere. We have seen companies like Zoya Sugar and Mumias Sugar, on their deathbed. So what the government should do first is to identify, do some kind of an analysis to find out why these companies were shut down, provide a good enabling environment for such factories to thrive, because even if you are going to open others, they are going to operate within the same environment, the same atmosphere. Again, they will be open today, they will be closed next year. And I think we have some individuals in government who are really sleeping on the job. The president is communicating the outputs and the end result, which is pretty very good, but we have people who are supposed to draft the methodologies and the formula and the strategy of actually ensuring the Big Four agenda survives. If you look at the tenure of His Excellency Kibaki, you realize that it's the private sector that lays the golden eggs. And as we are speaking now, it's the government that is controlling the economy, as opposed to the private sector, because the private sector is the one that provides most employment, the one that is the highest taxpayer. So unless you review some monetary policies and get money out of government to the private sector, the Big Four agenda, I think they are going to flop.
Speaker Kagushia, what do you think?
No, the issue of housing really is a noble idea. The only challenge is that it introduces is that we do now tax employees much more. And we are looking at this in the light of more taxation that came with the issue of the health.
Right.
Now that the people who are actually employed are paying much more for NHIF, and the main problem comes when we introduce these funds, and you can see these funds have traditionally and historically been used for corruption purposes. Monies have been siphoned from these funds, and that's the case with NHIF, that's the case with the NSSF. Now, how different is government that going to run this kind of a fund where you are again drawing much more from an already overtaxed employee of an organization, of the government? And probably I would propose a way forward in this fund. Maybe once we have collected this money, now that we have so many young people in this country who are not employed, we have so many people that the government actually has now developed a policy to take to into technical institutes for technical training. Probably this money then can be, instead of being held somewhere in a fund in Nairobi and then being accessible to contractors, you know, people who end up benefiting from these kind of funds. This money then should be devolved back to these technical institutes, and wherever you have these young people in the counties, they should be able to then be given an area where they actually develop, and then they earn from it. And whatever the sales that are coming and whatever the collections that are coming, then help the young people and those technical institutes even to build more capacity. And that way, probably we are likely to engage a whole big group of young people who have been sidelined in the national development strategy. And that way, it's likely going to make more meaning. But as it is, I'm sure there is no direct link now or plan to engage these big group of young people who have not been, you know, mainstreamed into the development of this country. So it is an important, or is a good fund, but it has quite a number of challenges that the government really must overcome.
So, Senator Kangata, the Speaker is saying that a big part of the demographic of this country is not being tapped into when it comes to this affordable housing plan. It doesn't make sense for them, essentially.
No, I disagree 100%. This is the best idea that has ever come out of Jubilee. And I'll tell you several reasons. Number one, it is going to create employment. Just go to any typical mjengo and you see how many young people tend to be employed there. You'll find any typical mjengo has about, let's say, 30, 40 young people working there. And once we have this system put in place, you'll find so many people working in that industry. There will be a boom in construction industry. Number two, we are going to provide what is called cheap housing. Remember, cheap housing is a constitutional right guaranteed by the Constitution. So meaning government, we say progressively, had a duty to come up with a policy and think how it's going to realize that. Otherwise, one could have gone to court and say, no, you people, you are doing things which are unconstitutional. You have to provide housing for the people. Number three, and most importantly, and that's something Kenyans have never thought much about it, there is no country in this world that has ever developed without being urbanized. You must always congregate people together. Why? Because number one, it becomes cheaper to provide them with services, whether it is water, whether it is electricity, as opposed to the current system in Kenya, where development follows one person who is about 2,000 kilometers away, or let's say a water pipeline goes to get 3 people who are about 200 kilometers away. You must always bring people together so that those costs of providing infrastructure go down. That is cost per capita, cost per person. And the only way to do that is to provide housing, because through housing, you congregate people together. So therefore, number three, and probably to reply to my brother speaker here, this idea has already been escalated in the counties. Counties have given a commitment to this program that they are going to provide land once this program is able to roll out. And remember, this is not taxation. If you say this taxation, is like saying a pension is taxation. Our contribution to pension fund is taxation. It is not taxation. This is what is called a mandatory contribution. Part of the money you earn, you keep it in the pool. And by the way, after a certain period of time, if you are not interested with this money, you'll be entitled to draw back. You can ask for that money again, and it will come back to you with an interest. What probably we should be pushing for now is what are called regulations, which I am aware the concerned ministry is continuing to engage with public to come up with a policy document which is going to be crystallized into regulations, will be brought before the National Assembly and the Senate. For us, we give a ratification so that we are able to know how that system actually works. Otherwise, this is a good idea that is going to ensure Kenyans now move to the next 21st century, where people become developed through what is called urbanization. It's our tool for urbanizing our society. Once you urbanize, by the way, so many things, by the way, go away, including, by the way, our politics. You find people in an urban area, even their politics tends to be more somehow, they change, it becomes better.
And speaking of which, we're talking about urbanization, 61% of urban dwellers live in slums. And this project, of course, will touch on that. Many of those slum dwellers are not salaried. So even when you're talking about a mandatory deduction, where is that going to come? Can they even afford a program like this, which is what comes up a lot of times when we talk about this affordable housing plan?
Victoria,
Let me tell Mheshimiwa here that these are political statements. The actualization of the Big Four is a legal question. Serious legal questions are going to be raised about this issue. The mandatory contribution. Government is saying it will start deducting in January. They are going to get a big problem because the courts will know if the law has not been followed, if proper consultation has not been followed, if proper participation in terms of Article 10 of the Constitution has not been followed. The questions that people are asking, there are people who own their own houses. You make it mandatory for them to contribute. For who? The question of the political statements that there will be balloting. Who gains? The certainty, is it an investment? Mortgage is an investment with a specific property in mind with a certain value and certain returns. So in my own view, I think that government, by extension the political class, has not been properly advised that this is no longer the old constitutional dispensation where political statements can be actualized. The judiciary will only read the law in light of the Constitution. Mheshimiwa has admitted there are no rules, there are no regulations, there is no policy document on this, there is no statute to deal with this.
Can I?
Just a minute. Let me
finish.
As far as I know, there is no parliament statute on the Big Four agenda. Parliament will allocate money. The question of the people's contribution must be within a statute. The rights of those people who contribute must be spelled out in a statute. So it cannot be just a general statement that you contribute a certain percentage of this amount of money, you will get that. Number two, it is only unfortunate that sometimes the judiciary cannot be given such an audience to come and defend themselves. But the judiciary as constituted is the last place where they will defend the law and the rule of law. My position has always been that let government get the best legal brains before they actualize anything, because I know this thing will hit a snail, it will be stopped. I'm not a judge, but I've looked at the way they are doing it. They are pushing it. It is a Jubilee project, but the Jubilee project runs based on the principles of the law.
So this is no different than a campaign promise, in your view?
To me, these are more like campaign promises. I call them political statements about the laptops, about what, which are good. They massage our ego. The slum people, have we dealt, Honorable Didmas raised this question. There are white elephants that have collapsed every village, government-wide projects. When Trump came to power in the US, he said, I will go back to revive those that were there before we start new issues. Today, the American man and the American woman has more money in his pocket than any other regime that has been there. Why? We prioritize that what we do. Where did Vision 2030 go? We have abandoned Vision 2030.
Okay, valid point. Senator, you wanted to respond really quickly to...
Yes, yes. He is saying that we do not have a legal framework supporting or anchoring the idea of taking away money from, or deducting money from people's salaries.
Or just generally the Big Four agenda?
It is there. No, I want to be specific on this one.
On the housing, okay.
It is there under the so-called Finance Act, which my friend here passed the other day. It was something that was very contentious, if you can recall, right? It was a contentious issue, and Parliament, in its wisdom, passed that one. Number two, this issue is also anchored in the Constitution. It is the Constitution which says housing is a constitutional right for every Kenyan. So surely, are you saying you want the government not to implement it? Thirdly, they are raising a philosophical question. What is the role of government or state in a so-called free market economy? To me, notwithstanding that we have become preachers of capitalism, government still maintains a key role in ensuring the poor access certain services which cannot be given by the markets.
So government will then help the slum dwellers upgrade their
Yes,
housing.
of course, it's the whole rationale. And by the way, it is true. We may not be able to give each and every person within 5 years, but it's a progress. When we start with one person, we give 2 persons. To me, that is a progress. What's wrong with
Victoria, I have, I'm tempted to think that, my good friend got married recently, maybe still in honeymoon. There is nobody, no Kenyan is saying that the Big Four agenda are not a good thing.
Yes.
The question as to whether the housing is going to revolutionize the settlements in this country is no question. All the Big Four agenda, these are things which Kenyans need for sure. But I want to tell my good senator that the output is determined by the strategy. So if you do not get the strategy properly, the output will flop. You'll only visualize it on how it should supposed to look like. For example, when we are saying that this housing program, housing fund, was not well thought and properly planned. For example, why will a man who is remaining with a year or 6 months to retire be contributing to such a scheme? Is it going to? Then we are saying that this money will be accessible after 15 years. We have some people who are remaining with the 3 years to retire. So are we saying that after they have retired, they are going to wait for 15 years? Maybe they would have died. So what we are saying that these are very good agenda for this country, but the government needs to commit much of its resources, much of its time, researching and coming up with a strategy. For example, we were told, even myself, I've been buying books for the new curriculum, but yesterday I was told it has been suspended. It means that it was a good idea, but the minister has seen that we have some missing links and missing gaps somewhere, and we do not want this to happen again on the Big Four agenda. So that's why we are saying, please, before you come out and tell Kenyans something that is very good for them, that they are willing to hear, lock yourself in a room, look through it yourself, and have a strategy on how you are going to achieve some of these agendas that we are talking about.